Hi. So today I'm making a video that is pretty much just a question that I'm constantly getting asked all the time. People always ask me why I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I get a lot of shit for not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. If you're not American, this video, you probably don't care about it, but the Pledge of Allegiance is something that is super important and sacred to a lot of Americans. And the fact that I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, especially in the conservative place that I live in, kind of creates problems for me. So yeah. I feel very passionate about the fact that I should not have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to tell you all about it and tell you why. So first and foremost, I'd like to say that me and anyone who doesn't stand for the pledge probably knows that you get a lot of shit for it, and it's kind of an issue. I am in high school, and I've had teachers send me to the principal's office because I didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I've had people be deeply offended when they find out that I don't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. They see it as a personal attack on them and a personal attack on America itself, which it's totally not, or at least I don't view it to be. So, anyone who doesn't stand for the pledge would know that it doesn't come without its repercussions, that's for sure. So the main reasons why I don't stand for the pledge is what the pledge says. So we'll first get into what the pledge says and what it talks about and why I don't necessarily stand for that and why I don't necessarily agree with that. So a big phrase that I kind of have the most issue with is the phrase under God. So in the Pledge of Allegiance it says under God and one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That whole thing I have a problem with because, well, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. To me, God is a fictional concept, and it's fine if you do believe in God. That's perfectly okay, and I will fight for people's right up and down to worship whatever God they want to worship and believe in whatever religion they want to believe in and practice whatever faith they want to practice, as long as it doesn't infringe upon the rights of other people. I will 100% stand by them all day, every day. But I respect the same in return, meaning I shouldn't have to say under God, because the phrase under God in the pledge kind of leads to an assertion that God is real. Saying under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, that whole thing is kind of making an assumption that there is a God. And clearly, I don't think there is one, so I don't think I should have to say it. And as far as that being such a big American thing, I understand that most Americans are very Christian. Not all, definitely not all, but we definitely have a huge Christian history. Well, at least somewhat we do. And so a lot of people would argue, oh, well, that's a part of America. America's a Christian nation. I would say America's not a Christian nation. And the reason I would say that is because it is not legally enforced that you have to be Christian, at least not in this modern age. In the year 2021, it's not illegal to not be Christian in America. It's not legally enforced. You can be whatever religion you proclaim to be. You can practice any faith. And so to me, because it's not legally enforced that I have to be Christian, I don't see America as a Christian country. Yes, it is true that the majority of people in America are Christian. And if we're talking demographics, then yes, it's a Christian country, but it isn't by law. And so I don't think that I should have to participate in something like that. So, yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing is the phrase justice for all, which sounds great. Justice for all, who doesn't want that? I'd like to hope and think that everybody wants that. The phrase justice for all definitely is good in concept, but I don't think it actually happens in execution. I don't think in America we have justice for all. In fact, historically speaking, it's flat out not true. It's 100% false that in America's history we've had justice for all. We haven't. It's that simple. So I don't really feel as though that's a good assertion to make. And you could say, oh, well, the pledge kind of reflects how it is now. But the truth is that even nowadays, I don't necessarily think we have justice for all in America. And even if we did, the pledge was not written anytime soon. The pledge was created a while back. And it wasn't that long ago, but when it was created, there definitely was not justice for all for every single American citizen. So it's just a flat out lie. With that one, I'd say practice what you preach, and maybe I'll change my mind. Um, so that's that. And the allegiance in itself, saying I pledge allegiance to something. If you're not really familiar with what allegiance, the word in itself kind of means, it's like think of almost like an unwavering loyalty no matter what. And that's a soft definition. I personally do not have an unwavering loyalty to America no matter what. That's definitely not true. I don't feel an unwavering loyalty to any country or place. I just simply think that's not okay. I think that it is perfectly fine to have a sort of allegiance to certain cultural aspects. Maybe I can say I like the culture of America, but the country itself, I feel like that gets a little nationalistic, and maybe that's fine with you. It doesn't flow well with me. And then there comes children. In American schools, children are forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance. They are. And in America, it's now not necessarily legally enforced, but it's definitely socially enforced for sure. Not that long ago, it was pretty much a requirement that everybody says the Pledge of Allegiance. I believe it was in the 90s, when I could be wrong, so don't quote me on that. But it wasn't that long ago where that was kind of a required thing. Only recently that is no longer a requirement. And so because of that, there's kind of a lot of social repercussions for sure. If I don't stand for the pledge, people hate on me big time. Every time the first day of school happens and the pledge is about to happen, I get a little nervous. I do. I get a little nervous because I know that everybody's going to stop and look at me and stop and stare at me, and it's not going to be great. And I've had some pretty terrible experiences. There was a substitute teacher that was subbing for one of my classes, and the pledge happened, and he was a very patriotic guy, I guess you could say. He really, really believed that everyone should stand for the pledge. And then when I didn't stand for the pledge, in front of the whole class, he started yelling at me, telling me if I don't like this country, I should just get out, or I should go back to my country, which is kind of ironic because we were in my hometown. Just saying all these awful things, telling me that I'm just like the worst person ever because how dare I not stand for the pledge. And he didn't get in any consequences, any trouble from that whatsoever. I I definitely 100% reported that situation because I don't feel like that's okay. It's fine. You can have that opinion if you want. You can think that I'm wrong all you want. But in a public school setting, as a teacher, as a substitute, you're not allowed to publicly shame me in front of an entire class. I guess you are if you're in a conservative state because nothing happened to him. Jack shit happened to him. Literally, it didn't even matter. And I had a run-in with him much later on. I I worked at this store for a little bit, and he came into the store one day and he gave me some major shit for it. And he almost got me fired. That's how big of a deal it is to people. The Pledge of Allegiance means so much that this one guy will go to extreme lengths to try and get me fired simply because he doesn't like that I don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. And in American schools, little kids are taught to recite the pledge. From the time I was in first grade, it was mandatory that we learn and memorize the pledge, and I'll never get it out of my head. I can recite it to this day forever, and I think I always will be able to. I think that's so wrong that from such a young age, you really think that little first graders understand what they're saying? They don't understand what they're saying, yet you're forcing them to say that. That's indoctrination. I can't speak. That is indoctrination. I can't speak. Okay. This is going so well. As I was saying, um, it's not okay in my mind to take young first graders. When you're in first grade, you're like 7, 6 years old, around there. That's crazy to make young children recite something that they can't even fully understand yet and to make them memorize it from such a young age to ingrain it in their head. It's pure brainwash, honestly. I really do see it that way. It's not necessarily okay to me. I think that you should be able to have and hold whatever opinion you want. I don't necessarily have to agree with you, but you can have and hold whatever opinion you want. You can think that the pledge is amazing. You can think America is amazing. And I'm not saying it isn't, but I don't think that you should be able to push that narrative onto young children whatsoever. Um, that's less about education and more about making them into sheep for society. That's teaching young children the pledge in schools isn't doing anything to help them in their life or further their education in any way, shape, or form. It's purely just pushing a "we love America" agenda is the idea. And it's one thing to be proud of your country and to love your country and to love certain cultural aspects of your country. I mean, no country is perfect, but you can love a lot about your country. It's a whole nother thing to say, we're the best country in the world. We're the most amazing. Growing up, I was kind of fed that message that America's the best, America is perfect, America this, America that, and that doesn't lead to anywhere good. That's nationalism. There's nothing wrong with other countries, and I by no means think America's the best. I'm not saying they're the worst or that they're terrible. I'm just saying I don't rank them as number one. Um, and I don't think that I should be forced or pushed into believing that they're number one by any means. So, kids shouldn't have to say it. That's pretty much the point of what I'm saying. And this one, people are going to get a little mad at me about. This last point is going to be kind of, this whole video is going to be controversial. Like, there's going to be so many people who think this video is terrible, but what can you do? Um, this last point is going to get a lot of people upset. Even people who agree with me probably won't like this. So, oh my gosh. Um, basically, my last kind of point to summarize this and to sum this up, a lot of conservative Americans I notice who feel offended by me not standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, and not all, this is a huge generalization. I'm not attacking individual people here. I'm talking in a general basis within my personal experience. Generally speaking, a lot of them, for whatever reason, seem to have this kind of Islamophobia in a way. They don't really like people from Muslim countries, and they also don't really like people from certain countries that they personally deem unfit for whatever reason, or they don't like the way the government works in that country. I'm not even going to get into my feelings about that because that could be a whole separate video. But I do think that they fail to realize that there's some similarities. There's a lot of cultures in the world where they get down on their knees and they say a prayer at the start of their schools, or whatever it is, the start of a ceremony, the start of something, and they do basically their version of the Pledge of Allegiance, and they pledge to their flag. But over here in America, a lot of conservative people say that that's wrong, and they say, oh, look at the brainwashing. They're so brainwashed by their government to believe that they should do that. Like, look at all this stuff. But the truth is that a lot of Americans are the exact same way. Really, the only difference is that they view it as the other in a way. A lot of conservative, I can't speak today. This is not helpful. Why can't I speak? A lot of conservative Americans, they just feel as though because it's happening over here and because it's America, now it's okay. when if the same exact kind of Pledge Allegiance situation happens in another country, they say it's brainwash and that it's terrible. The honest truth is, it's really less about the brainwash, and personally, I think it's just a little bit of racism and xenophobia, is the honest truth. I think the only reason why they have a problem with their version of the Pledge of Allegiance in other countries that they don't necessarily find to be okay, is really just blatant xenophobia and racism. And I'm not even going to say, like I said, I'm not going to say any of my personal feelings on whatever it is that goes on in other countries, because again, that's more that's more for a specific video for a separate time. So yeah. But I think it's just pure racism is the honest truth. And the truth of it is, I feel like at the Pledge of Allegiance, at its core, is really just American nationalism disguised as being patriotic. It's, at its core, it's just sort of this idea of, I'm a true, real American and I love America. And you know, when I was very, very little, I was excited to say the pledge. And then I started to think about it and I was like, this is actually bullshit. And I shouldn't have to do this. It's just, it's crazy to think about, but you get this overwhelming sense of pride when you grow up in American society, or at least in a very conservative place in America. You kind of get this overwhelmingly sense of like pride because you really do think, oh, my country is the best in the world. But it's not really. Every country has its problems. And just because there's certain things that I like about America, or just because it's my home country, doesn't mean that I should have to pledge allegiance to it. I didn't choose to be born here. Think about it. If I was born somewhere else, I'd be pledging allegiance to them. Nationalism is just pure idiocracy. There's really no reason for it. So, to anyone who's always asking me why I don't stand for the pledge or giving me shit about it, it's really just because I'm not a fucking sheep and I can think for myself. So, um, have that being said, don't take that too seriously. I'm not saying that if you stand for the pledge that you're a sheep or that you can't think for yourself or that you don't have free thought. That's not the point I want to get across. I don't necessarily care if you say the Pledge of Allegiance. If it's something that you like, it's something that you feel passionate about, go right ahead. It doesn't bother me. That's not what I'm trying to get across. I'm just saying that while I respect your right to stand for the pledge and to feel proud of your country and to love your country, if you want to pledge allegiance to your country, go right ahead. But you can't go ahead and claim that America is a free country if I'm not free to not stand for the pledge. You can't say, oh, we have so many freedoms here in America. America is the most free country in the world, and then turn around and try and take one of my freedoms. It is my freedom of choice to not have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I respect you standing for the pledge if that's something that you do and something that you're into. Respect that I don't. There's also this weird conception that it's about the military. If we're talking historically speaking, the pledge isn't really entirely about the military. I guess you could kind of link it back to that, but that's kind of up for debate. And even if it was about the military, I have nothing against people in the military. I've met a lot of people in the military. They're wonderful people. I have family who is in the military, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I support it personally. I don't really support war. That's not really something I'm about. So even if it was about supporting the military, I don't know if I still would. And the honest truth is that military in itself, I don't really think is the overall takeaway of the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't think that the pledge's main sort of general idea has anything to do with the military. I think it's really just a way to show off how much you supposedly love your country. It's false patriotism. That's the way I see it. So please don't harass me about it. I'm perfectly fine and willing to answer questions about it because people always ask me questions about it, and that's fine. That's great. But that's all I have to say about it. There you go. I don't necessarily think that we should have to recite the pledge, and I don't think that there should be social pressure to either, and most of all, I don't think children should have to learn it. So, goodbye.